A date which will live in infamy.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
Early this morning, the Allies began the assault on the northwestern coast of Hitler's European forces.
Bonjour, my name is Clément Horvath, a young Frenchman, history buff, and author of Till Victory, the Second World War by those who were there. In this fourth episode of Till Victory, a podcast about World War II and peace, I'm having a conversation with British tank gunner Cecil Newton, veteran of the 4th, 7th Dragoon Guards from Aldbourne, Wiltshire. Unlike my previous American guests, Tom Rice and Sam Carlyle, who only appear in the Tome 2 of Till Victory, for now only available in France, Cecil's story is told in the first tome, published by Pen and Sword Books in October 2020. On June 6, 1944, he landed with the first wave on Gold Beach in one of those special Sherman DD tanks and destroyed a German blockhouse. We'll talk about D-Day, of course, but also about the day he was seriously wounded in Germany. As a matter of fact, it's incredible that he's still around to talk about it today. Cecil will talk about psychological trauma and remembering the sacrifice of his brothers in arms and of his brother, who was shot by SS soldiers pretending to surrender only a month before the end of the war. 3/4 of a century later, Cecil was stuck at home because of the lockdown and this coronavirus crisis, and therefore wasn't able to travel to Normandy like he usually does. So I gave him a call, and I'm sorry in advance for the sound quality of the phone call, but there's unfortunately not much I can do about that. However, this was a very emotional and important conversation, so please give that great man all the attention he deserves.
Hello.
Hello, Cecil. It's Clement.
Clement, yes.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. You know, I'm in the house and confined here as a vulnerable person. That's I'm over 96 now. They're looking after me.
Well, I'm sure you've seen worse times than this. Do you remember when World War II was declared?
Yes, I was very young at that age compared with present-day people. I mean, a 20-year-old was about a 16-year-old at the moment. And I do remember Chamberlain, who was then the Prime Minister, waving a piece of paper in his hand and saying peace at our time. That would have been on a cinema newsreel. We hadn't got any television then. Yes, I remember it, but it didn't worry me very much.
Why did you join the army?
My brother was a cadet at school. He was very keen. And the next door neighbours were in the tanks. The Dear Brothers, and I just went along with that and joined the army. I hadn't got any preconceived ideas about what was happening. I wasn't thinking too much about it, to be quite frank. Everybody else was going in, and I was called up. No, I wasn't called up, I volunteered, but that's how it worked out.
On D-Day, the tank regiment you joined was using special Sherman DD tanks, the duplex drive, that could float on the water. Can you tell us about your training?
These DD tanks, there was an exercise at Sutherland Bay, and 6 of the tanks sank, the duplex drive tanks sank. It was realised that it was a rough day and that they couldn't cope with rough weather. But fortunately for me, the Valentine was used then for a duplex drive, and which has a 4-man crew, and I was, we were set up for a Sherman, which had a 5-man crew. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't in the exercise, but the rest of the 4 of the tanks and they came back in naval uniform, white polo necks things, bell bottom. And they never spoke about it. They were so shocked that but the training was, gunnery training and all that business. But the DD, well, they learned a lesson with the DD tanks that you couldn't launch in rough weather. And very fortunately, we had a very good captain, Richards, in the army, and he was the liaison officer for the Navy. And when he came to D-Day, of course, the Navy had complete control, but he was on board a ship, and he the DD tanks waded in. Otherwise, it would have been an absolute disaster.
What was going through your mind before the invasion? Were you scared?
Before the invasion, I was just wondering what was going to happen, and no strong thoughts about it at all. I didn't anticipate what was going to happen. So, but when we did land, of course, the blockhouse came under fire from HMS Belfast and Iran, I think, flying off, and eventually they surrendered. But I can't remember any emphatic or definite thoughts about it. Just get on with it and do it. You see, the blockhouse was firing enfilade down the beach both sides, couldn't fire frontwards, so it couldn't really do anything about firing at us. But if we hadn't sunk, as we did, or got bogged down in that shell hole by the blockhouse, we were on the right. And if it had, the gun was pointing towards us down the beach, and if we had gone very much further, it would have got us. But we went down that shell hole, and which I suppose Belfast had made, and we were saved from having a direct hit from the blockhouse because we were very near it. But they couldn't get us because they couldn't traverse the gun round to get us. The crew came out, and the captain in the middle, half a dozen of them, his white shirt and his German his hat, cap on, and they sent in some infantry, left them, took them away, and left us to it. That was about middays by then. As I said, I went and got a bicycle for my heat and had a ride down the beach, the Gold Beach. So I got some holiday out of it.
And after D-Day, you had to fight in Norman hedgerows, the bocage, which you were not properly trained for. Is that right?
Well, after that, of course, we went into action until I was wounded in November. But we had no training for going to a place that looked like the replica of Normandy. No, I can't remember that at all. We went to before we went over, we had gunnery practice at ranges. But I can't remember very much about it, actually. There wasn't a battle in Normandy that we won. They were all a disaster for the regiment, Cecil especially, Yorks. But we weren't involved in it, but Villa's Bocage was, they parked in the village high street and going from west to east, and the tank ace and two other Tiger tanks came up from the south, and I can't remember the German tank case now, but he went down the line, just destroying the tanks, shooting at people, and the second in command understood, climbed a tree at the east end of the cars, and stayed up there until the next morning to come down. Saved his own life, of course, but they had people in command of, they were all county regiments. I mean, it was the 4th County of London Yeomanry, who were at Elizabeth Cars, commanded by the Honourable somebody or other, I can't remember now. They'd been sort of social groups before the war, and then when the war came, of course, they were not trained. It was the same as our regiment, the 47th Dragoon Guards. They were an equestrian club with troops enjoying sports facilities. And then in 1938, they were converted to tanks. They had no tank experience. But the Germans were skilled, trained troops. They were soldiers. We were civilians. It was civilians versus the well-trained army.
You actually were wounded in Tripsrath, Germany. Can you tell us about that day?
Yes. Again, we'd been reduced to 2 tanks. We were in a farm. We arrived at a farm that just the 2 tanks, and we had to. We dug a trench in front of the farmhouse, and the driver, Cliff Ford, who was an exceptionally good person, I always had great confidence in him, and he went and got a door out of the farmhouse and put it over everything, and we started off first thing in the morning, down into the village, turn left, then turn right into the high street, and went down the high street, and the commander said, bail out of our tank, and he was an old man, he was elderly-ish, and he fiddled around while I waited underneath the gun. That was the only way to get out of a Sherman, was for the operator to get to wait his turn while 2 others got out, and he got out all right. Then the gunner got all right was on the right. I got out, and when I was getting out the turret with my left leg dangling, that the tank blew up, caught fire. They caught fire very, very easily. The show was completely ridiculous, really. It had very soft steel, and I remember a German Spandau bullet stuck in the metal of the armour. It was that soft, and put the belly on the back, which, of course, the Germans went for. It appeared that it was a young German, blonde German, with potato mashers, they call them, a grenade. I thought it was a tank that hit it at first, but it wasn't. And I got out with my left leg dangling, and the blast of the tank shattered that left leg, and I stood on the top of the tank, wondering how I was going to get down. And I didn't see them, but passing infantry must have come past, and they shot me in the upper chest, and it knocked me off the tank, and I landed in the mud by the track of the tank. By that time it was burning red hot, the tank, the Sherman, called, Tommy Cookers, or we used to call them Ronson lighters. And I was wondering what to do when, again, this Cliff Ford rushed out there. it was absolutely incredible that young 20-year-old like him, how they behaved. It was impeccable. As soon as he saw I was in trouble, he reacted immediately to try and rescue me. Mm-hmm. Extraordinary, really. But they lobbed a couple of grenades over the tank and got him in the legs, and the co-driver was behind him and missed me, of course. And I crawled into the house, and Buster Brown was waiting for me, and he got me on the bed, went out of the back door to get some morphine from the infantry officer, which he did, gave me, and I just lay there, and they said they'd come and get me in the evening, which they did. They put me on a stretcher and got me out, but the place was completely surrounded and was under fire, and the heroics that were everyday sort of thing. Something like that happened. Somebody was rescued, or something ghastly was happening to young people, incinerated alive, and hauled out of the Sherman with ropes, in sort of black. They were in the sitting position. It was absolutely extraordinary, really, that these young people should have been put to such trauma. And some of them, of course, couldn't stand it. And the co-driver was eventually found in Nijmegen, wandering about completely, completely out of this world. He was sent to a psychiatric hospital, and he did recover, but many didn't recover, became mentally unstable. People don't realize it, Clement, what to be in a situation like that really means. And I don't blame them, but they can't really appreciate, what their sons and daughters have been through. And what did depress me when I came out of the army and started the association was talking to the mothers and the widows of those young men. The regiment wouldn't do anything about an association, so I started it up and put a memorial at Leap, and created enough money to put a lead capping on the memorial at Croydon, which intercepted a telephone conversation from two of the senior officers. Nobody's worried about referring to me, and the problem was that the memorial at Croydon was absolutely saturated, and there were no names of those who were killed on it. So two people, but they were out locally from here with the slate plaques, and replaced what was on the front of the memorial with these two slate plaques with the names of those who had been killed. Otherwise, they'd have never known, the relatives visiting Croydon. They'd never known what that their sons were remembered at all, which is quite ridiculous.
Yeah. You also lost a very dear person in the war, your brother, only a month before the end of it.
My brother, who was killed, as you know, he got out of the tank out of his armoured car. He'd only been in the armoured car transferred him for 4 days. He got out to take the two who were surrendering in, not realizing that they were in the nearby copse were 4 or 5 Romanian survivors of the people he just slaughtered and killed him. But they must have killed some of those 2 prisoners who were coming in. They must have been killed as well. It's so sad, really. So sad.
Do you feel resentment towards the Germans?
There are some who, created misdemeanors, but I would want to carry any resentment no further. It was a war that we shouldn't have entered in the first place. It was too easy. Churchill should have made every endeavour to facilitate a deal of some sort, but eventually, of course, it escalated into 40 million dead. I wonder if he realised what he was doing. I very much doubt it, but I think he ought to have made every endeavour to make sure that war, didn't develop into a war. We actually declared war on Germany. They didn't declare war on us. We didn't get a reply within a year from what they'd requested. So they said, we must presume we're at war. And they just dropped into it. There was more behind it than there ever been divulged, I'm afraid. We'll never find out why that war went ahead at that time.
Let's talk a bit about Brexit, because when we first met, you told me you were fighting at the time for what you used to call the United States of Europe. And when I visited you at your house last summer, there was a European Union flag flying in your backyard.
Yes.
How do you feel now that the UK has left the Union?
I've always had a great admiration for France. They became a secular republic. They don't have a monarchy. They don't. The churches in Normandy, and I suppose it's throughout the country, had the mayor looked after them. There was no vicar. If you wanted a vicar, you have to come from a seminary. I thought that was, to keep religion out of, let people make up their own minds and not to let it influence the general population. In this country, of course, there had been that dreadful problem in Ireland. The IRA, where people were killing each other for their religion. And then in Scotland, they're all Protestants, so it didn't occur there, but it plays such an important part that the best thing to do is to not have it in the entry into politics or anything like that. Keep it out. But it did happen. And as far as the United States of Europe is concerned, something must have gone significantly wrong. Mostly in that it hadn't been properly thought out in the first place, and that there were disputes over fishing and things like that. She came across. I was very sad. I wanted to have a united Europe that worked, but it was impossible to get, presumably, and the UK got out. I was hoping that we'd follow the United States of Europe and become a secular republic and join up with France, Germany again, and all the other European countries and become a successful trading group. But that never happened, did it? Those in the UK who didn't want to be joined up with France. But I think it would have done us the power of good if we had joined up with France. It's a lovely country.
Do you think that the Union is important in maintaining peace?
I certainly did.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be a successful group of countries that lived harmoniously and in the trading business, and would become, the bigger the country or the bigger the area, like America, the more successful it gets.
So now you have a school in Crawley, Normandy, bearing your name. How does it make you feel?
The school bearing my name was a very grateful thank you, but the French have always been like that. They've been generally thankful that they were liberated.
Yes, we are.
From the invasion of Latin at that time, and the sacrifice that was made by those young people.
You lost 124 members of your regiment. What is it like to listen to young school children reading their names, like last summer when I was with you in Normandy? And what would you like to tell these kids?
Difficult to say, but to the school children, I'd say your life is very precious. Do not lose it.
Yeah.
I hope that there won't be such a situation arising in the future where young 20-year-olds have got to sacrifice their lives for in any way. I think of my brother. He had a girlfriend from Scarborough. They would obviously get married, and have a family, build a house like I did, have a successful career like I've had, and enjoy all the pleasures of the countryside. But no, he was 22 and it was taken away from him through the stupidity of politicians.
And we will never forget his sacrifice and your comrades' sacrifices, and we are eternally grateful for what you did.
My comrades sacrificed themselves, and they were 20-year-olds. I remember them individually, and thankfully to have such nice people with me, and I can never forget it. I have just recently had a plaque put in the garden with the bearing the names of the two powers in it, the Longevre, inscribed on it, and with the names of the 80 light infantry who were killed on that day, the 14th of June. And I can see it from here now, with the French flag flying, the poppies below it, one of which was made by one of the school children, I think from Croydon. It's a permanent reminder to me of the sacrifices that were made, not only by our regiment, but by the other regiments, like the DLI, who I saw being killed. But
do you think we do enough to remember them?
I think it's up to the individuals to remember, which they do in this village, of course, in a small community, to remember. I think if people want to remember further, then they should, I don't know what they can do, really. I think a large group of people, it's very good to, like the November remembrance, but if you didn't know the person personally, it's quite difficult, really, to consider the remembrance. But I think enough's done. We've got the British Legion over here, and they do very good remembrance services, etc. So I don't see very much can be done to remember, unless individuals want to remember it with memorials, but as I do. But it's I think it's going along okay at the moment, making sure that you don't slip into a terrible conflagration like we had in that World War II.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Cecil, and I will never say it enough. Thank you for everything you've done and for our freedom. Thank you.
I'm sorry about my deafness, but it's one of the many ailments that I have. But press on, regardless. My regards to you, and hope one day we'll meet again.
Yes, me too. This year won't be possible because of that virus, but I'm looking forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this house all year. I'm not allowed out, really, because of my, if I went out, protecting the old folk over here, they were indeed.
Yeah.
So there you are. Okay, no grumbles. Cheerio for now, Clement. Thank you for phoning.
Thank you so much for your time. Goodbye. Well, that was very emotional, but there's another thing I wanted to add. I was lucky enough to visit Cecil last year in the UK with a French TV crew that was doing a report about my work, and Cecil showed me the piece of shrapnel that was taken out of his leg by the medic after a trip's wrath, and believe me, that piece was huge, about the size of probably half my fist. It's incredible that he survived it, in addition to his tank catching on fire and being shot in the back. After our interview, Cecil wrote me an email saying, "I did not get around the remarkable good fortune I had to survive at Trip's Wrath. All night, the German multi-barreled mortar, the moaning mini shells, were going over the farm, and when we were leaving at first light, they eventually found the target and demolished the farm buildings." I feel honored to have been able to spend so much time with Cecil, and it's such a good thing that he's still around and doing all this work to preserve the memory of his brothers in arms. Remember his words, life is precious. If you like this podcast, please subscribe. There are a lot of great episodes coming and you don't want to miss them. Make those stories known, share them around, and hit the like button on whatever you're listening to them on. All the links for the book and social media are on tiltvictory.com, and I appreciate all your messages. Till next time, thank you for listening. Au revoir.